There was an idea. The idea was to bring together a group of remarkable people to see if they could become something more. To see if they could work together when we needed them to fight the battles we never could. If you are a human being with access to the internet and a local movie theatre, you are certainly familiar in this, the year of Kami Above 2026, of the Avengers. It's a pretty simple yet effective idea, isn't it? To take a bunch of fantastical characters from their own particular comic runs and mash them together into one fighting force of sheer uncontested awesomeness. Of course, they aren't the only team of superheroes out on the market, but they do have one thing the rest of the lot don't have. Nick Fury, the big-brained super spy responsible for putting the team together. At least if you go by MCU canon. Or so you'd think. After all, how many other superhero teams sourced from multiple distinct comic runs could have been formed by a bold black super spy with eyewear and a snazzy coat who is in charge of a nebulously powerful organization dedicated to dealing with far-out threats to the world? As it turns out, 2. Which isn't a lot, but it is weird that it happened twice. All of this is to say, what if, instead of Western comics, the Avengers roster was drawn up from the likes of manga characters? That seemed to be the idea at work behind Jump Force, a 2019 video game released by Bandai Namco, celebrating the Shonen Jump manga line's 50th anniversary. This was a game where anime Nick Fury, a fellow named Director Glover, created presumably as a homage to Nick Fury by legendary mangaka Akira Toriyama, schemed to have Luffy, Naruto, and Goku squad up. Damn the consequences. I remember being a wide-eyed university student back when it was announced. I recall following the news cycle about it and looking forwards to every new scrap of news that came out. I watched the storyline compilations, I keyed into the behind-the-scenes material, and I speculated how Jump Force would continue onwards from its climactic cliffhanger. That cliffhanger, to this day, has not been resolved. So, in keeping with the Avengers illusion, I thought, fine, I'll do it myself, and decided to post up on Space Battle's Jump Force Aftermath. This is, was, and remains a creative writing and world-building project by yours truly, aimed at constructing a setting based off of the Jump Force fighting game by Shonen Jump, and the scenario it presented. That scenario, legally distinct Nick Fury, was actually an outer god in charge of beaming visions of manga settings, which themselves were actually alternate universes to our own, into the brains of artists and writers the world over in the hopes that the morals, themes, and characters of those worlds could convince us of the real world to be better. A pretty sappy, sentimental, and sweet story beat. The sort you'd expect of a game made to celebrate the medium of manga, and about what you'd expect of a 50th anniversary project. And oh boy did it give me ideas. Especially since the game ends with the Jump Worlds still smashed and stitched together with our own. What the heck would a world like that look like? How might its plot points have developed if a sequel to the game was created? How might the whole smash the Jump Worlds into the real world thing have panned out if we were to put our thinking caps on, instead of just accepting it's all nonsense, contrived for the purposes of a big crossover? Most of all, what would the next 8 years of that timeline look like? And how would the characters of the Jump Worlds adapt to being stuck together within our uniquely boring yet uniquely insane real world? Jump Force Aftermath was my go at tackling all of these quandaries and more. I'd use my noggin to have a thunk about Jump Force as its own unique alternate history setting, develop it within reason, and the odd pinch of improbably awesome fanfic moments here and there, while using the original game as a blueprint, measuring stick, and limiter for how wacky I got. Examples of the constraints I put upon myself are the characters and locations I can include that weren't in the original game. While I do stretch things here and there, for the most part it has to be in the game for me to pull it into the alternate history scenario. Characters who were inside locations that appear as maps in Jump Force are fair game. This will be because we never really got elaboration as to how per se the fictional characters of the Jump worlds ended up upon our own. That transition never happens on screen. So Jump Force Aftermath assumes they were brought to our universe alongside the famous locales from their setting. Characters who had cosmetics or attacks of theirs for the game's create a character are also fair game to include. And on the flip side of the coin, locations where they happen to be at the time of the crossover into the real world can be added to the list. Since only so many characters get involved in the plot of the game due to being in the right places at the right times, this way we can assume these other characters became indisposed of due to being in the wrong places at the wrong times, so never got to join the anime Avengers before the big bad was beaten and the canon storyline was wrapped up. I'm also going to reference storyline elements, such as this big emergency board from the campaign, for some of the spots I'll be inserting Jump World stuff into. Though, considering Director Glover was a big fat phony, and this doesn't account for the entire extra land masses the Earth would have had slapped down onto it, I won't be taking it as gospel. I will also go out on a few limbs for the sake of diversity between the Jump worlds when it comes to locations, characters, items, etc. If it is mentioned as being around during the campaign, it'll be factored into my equations for obvious reasons. If a thing featured in cut content, such as certain voice lines characters have for no-show acquaintances of theirs who never made it to DLC, like Rao from Fist of the North Star, Kenpachi from Bleach, or Sarada from Boruto, then I'll also be including it. Honestly, finding ways to rules lawyer my own stipulations is going to be part of the fun on my end. Now, continuing on, duplicate characters are disallowed to keep this writing project from having to deal too much with the serious ramifications that come with multiples of the same person existing in the world. The exception to this rule is if a duplicate character is from a different series than their counterpart, or are from an outright different timeline than their counterpart. So, a future Trunks and a Kid Trunks from Dragon Ball is acceptable, as is having Part 3 Polnareff and Part 5 Polnareff from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Even then though, I prefer to keep it to 2 variants max, and keep this to a handful of characters so their situations are unique and noteworthy and curiosities amidst the wider events of the whole anime and manga got smashed together with the real world thing Jump Force has going on with it. Only series confirmed to be in Jump Force get included into the alternate history of Jump Force Aftermath, as in only the series which the game outright said it was repping and which is contained in the lore of those series. As an example, this means that while Bleach got mixed in with the real world, it excludes Bleach's sister series, Burn the Witch, from the evil plans of anime Nick Fury, even though they exist within the same continuity. Conversely, the Shonen Jump series of Dr. Slump featured in the pages of the ongoing Dragon Ball manga during the Red Ribbon Army saga, so it has a claim to show up if ever my brain gremlins decide to delve into that load of wackiness. Ditto for Jacko the Galactic Patrolman. This'll all be the rule of thumb, starting out. Now, if I can find a loophole to exploit to get around my stipulations, you can be damn sure I'll exploit it. But that's fun times for later. The next restriction is that Jump Force Aftermath assumes the whole reality mix-up happened June 11th, 2018, same date that Jump Force got announced in real life. As such, the date also serves as a hard cutoff point from where content can be considered for inclusion into the alternate history project. That means no forcing in characters, items, or abilities from after 2018 unless they inescapably featured in post-release DLC and content updates in the Jump Force game, or could otherwise arise naturally even after the worlds were mixed up. Yet another example would be Monkey D. Luffy eventually developing his Gear 5 transformation, even though that didn't exist during the stretch of time he was plucked from. A big exception to most of the guidelines I've given are the afterlives and general other worlds of the various Shonen Jump franchises that were represented in Jump Force. Simply put, since these other worlds are tied into a metric ton of stuff for so many of these franchises, and since they are unreachable by conventional means anyways, I made the executive decision to throw my hands up and say all of them are now reachable and have a tether to Jump Force's Earth. Tangential to all this, all mythology and gods are real now. Saint Seiya's extended universe has long established that practically all mythological pantheons exist. Lots of these gods have their own other worlds, and all of them are established as being able to incarnate themselves into mortals to serve as their earthly avatars. Finally, this project will default to the manga canon of the Shonen Jump properties involved, much as Jump Force does, generally. However, since all of these fictional franchises do exist in real life, and since anime Nick Fury is proof that these fictional properties were also alternate universes, at least within the continuity of the Jump Force video game, one must consider that filler almost definitely came from somewhere, especially when you have filler characters canonized by the authors of the original mangas of the various franchises involved. As such, Jump Force Aftermath takes the stance that all non-canon content and filler is canon to the wider megaverse of Jump Force as alternate timeline potentialities of the canon manga that didn't happen yet could have. So, filler characters, abilities, and setting elements may appear in a pick-and-choose fashion where applicable, under the caveat that the non-canon events where they appeared did not happen within the manga continuities which Jump Force drew from, or at least, they did not occur as told. See the difference between Dragon Ball Z Broly the Legendary Super Saiyan and Dragon Ball Super Broly, for how that works out in practice. Essentially, filler characters from all the other franchises get the same treatment. The shape of them stays the same as their non-canon debuts, but I ensure that they and/or their stories materialize, or would have materialized, in a fashion that wouldn't contradict the manga canon. The biggest exception to the rules in all of this, as is tradition, is Yu-Gi-Oh! Since the series functions off of a card game that we have in the real world, that means we have decidedly non-manga canon cards out there in the wild. So it doesn't exactly matter if, say, Yubel isn't canonically relevant to the original Duel Monsters manga, or even the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX manga. The card exists right here, right now, and somebody screwing around with it is going to end badly regardless of if Kazuki Takahashi came up with said card or not. Finally, wish-granting objects like the Dragon Balls are a means to skirt around the rules I just laid out, since they, in theory, ought to be able to poof literally anything and or anyone from any involved settings into that of Jump Force. And that is essentially everything. Obviously, knowing something about the franchises I'll be yapping about in the videos to come will be handy. But ultimately, the core premise of what if anime suddenly became real is one that has universal appeal, at least with regards to anyone with an open mind, good taste, and a hunger for fanfic alternate history shenanigans. We've now covered all the nitty-gritty I could think to pipe up about. For closing statements, please do remember that this project is one I intend to be partly collaborative. If you have an idea or suggestion for the setting, or a correction to some lore or character interpretation you think I got wrong, please let me know and I'll take it all into account. If anyone watching this video has actually played Jump Force, and especially played it back to back when it was still active, do give me whatever first-hand deets you can. The game went end of service before I could nab it, and at this point I'm resigned to the classic entire storyline by way of YouTube video method of finding out what happened in its plot. Ultimately, this is something I'm doing for fun first and foremost, with me hoping to use the setting for something more substantive in the future. Hopefully we can all enjoy the ride together. So here's hoping this project has a good run, eh? That's just my side of things though. If you want to use my fleshing out of the setting for some homebrew RPG game, a fan work, or so on, then please do. If you could be so kind, then I'd appreciate it if you could share such creative endeavors with myself, and whatever community I end up carving out here on YouTube. And maybe get a little credit for what I'm doing on my end of things. At the end of the day though, I don't own any of these properties. I'm just a goober with a YouTube channel and a dream. Welp, I have nothing else to say. Video's over, folks.